Let's go.
I'd like to call the May 4th special meeting of the Bethel Inland Wetlands Commission to order. My name is Ken Stevens. I'm chairman of the Inland Wetland Commission and welcome you to our first virtual Zoom Inland Wetlands meeting. We have a pretty full agenda. So the first thing I'd like to do is have each of the commissioners introduce themselves and then we can move right into the agenda.
Before you do that, Ken, could you, they're doing that, could you adjust your mic so we could hear you a little bit better?
It's as loud as it'll go.
Okay, maybe get closer to it.
I get any closer, I'll be kissing it.
That's good. That's good.
That better?
Yes, thank you.
Right. You're welcome.
My ears.
All right, why don't we start with Peter?
Yeah, I'm Peter Samardik. I'm co-chair.
Kathy?
Oh, we have to unmute her. Got it.
Okay.
Okay. Kathy, I don't think everyone heard you. You're recording secretary, correct?
Yes.
Greg?
Craig Johnston, Commissioner.
Lou?
Lou David, alternate.
Patricia?
Pat Sal, alternate.
Patrick?
Pat Parafort, secretary.
Hey, I didn't miss anybody.
Charles Andrus, counsel. Chuck.
Chuck Andrus, counsel for the commission. And just, I bet you're going to mention this, but under the executive order, we're supposed to state our name and position whenever we speak.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Dave McCollum, Inland Wetlands Agent.
Beth Kavagna, Director of Planning.
Great. So part of the protocol for the meeting is everyone other than the commissioners will be on mute. If you need to speak, you can raise your hand and one of the commissioners will recognize you. This is a public hearing for two different applicants. And just to refresh everyone's memory, there will be an opportunity for the public.
Uh-oh.
You cut out, Ken.
I can't hear Ken.
Ken, we can't hear you.
We'll be able to try to address those questions, answer any of those issues that might continue to be outstanding. So first of all, I would like to reopen the hearing for 9 Good Hill Road and ask the applicant to provide.
Thank you again. For the record, this is Bill Marcus, Kona Wolf PC, on behalf of the applicant, Shelley Road LLC. And this is a
Are you addressing the commission?
hearing. And when we lift off, it's my understanding that we had to resolve the question of the watershed. Because in order to determine the impact of the development on the vernal pool, which has been studied, we'll get into that in a minute. But the first thing is that we have to determine the correct watershed. And I understand that, well, obviously, Mike Mizuko, who's on the line, and he'll take over in a minute. Mike has given you his watershed, and he has given you previously the methodology by which he determined his watershed. And of course, he is a licensed Connecticut civil engineer, and he has both the qualifications and the experience, and this commission is aware of it because he's been in front of you many times, to determine watersheds. Then we have, on the other hand, a report from Dr. Danzer, who is not a licensed engineer, and he has determined his own watershed, which is significantly different from Mike's. However, what we don't have in the Danzer report is any methodology as to how he determined it. So we have two issues with the Danzer report. One is methodology. The other is qualifications, because I believe he is a soil scientist, and he was not, to my knowledge, a licensed civil engineer here in the state of Connecticut. So the first thing is we may have to determine whether soil scientists are qualified by license and by experience to determine watersheds. And then we would have to know the methodology by which it's being determined here. So at the end of the last public hearing with this conundrum on the table, it was agreed that Wright Pierce would be asked to sign in on the issue of the watershed. Of course, they are civil engineers. They do have the qualifications. And I'm not sure that we've heard from them, at least as of the middle of this afternoon when I was on a conference call with Mike Mizuko. He had not heard from them. And so I'm not sure why that occurred, or whether we can take that as an acknowledgement that the applicant's watershed calculation or determination is in fact correct. So at this point, I'm going to ask Mike Mizuko to take over and to just run through really what seems to be the focal point of the inland wetlands application at this point. The findings about the quality of the vernal pool and what might have to be protected from an inland wetlands point of view in the vernal pool, and B, the impact of the proposed development on the vernal pool based on the watershed, the drainage area. So Mike, if you can sound off here, it'd be great.
Okay. Good evening. For the record, Mike Mizuko, professional engineer representing the applicant. And we did submit revised plans to Wright Pierce, and they did get comments back. Neil, you weren't aware. We got them late this afternoon.
Oh, okay, good.
Okay. And they did respond to, well, they just acknowledged my response regarding the methodology that I used and the mapping that I provided regarding the watershed. And I explained in pretty good detail in my comment about why the Danzer watershed was not correct. And their response basically was acknowledgement of my response, which means that they agreed to it. So there was a couple other minor comments in their latest report. That was addressed to their satisfaction. There was another minor comment about the maintenance of the infiltration trench, the level spreader / infiltration trench, with regard to it being spelled out as a separate line item in the maintenance schedule, which is not a big deal. I just had it lumped in with the catch basins and grates, the maintenance schedule with those 3 items. So that's not really a big deal. And I think that was about it with regard to, the one other question that they had was with regard to sizing of the infiltration trench. When I looked at the Connecticut Stormwater Manual and sized the infiltration trench based on their criteria, because we are adding in off-site watersheds, the bottom area of that trench had to be quite large. And what we ended up doing was, and I don't think that they were aware of it, I specified a C33 sand underneath the wall, so that would act as additional infiltration area, bottom trench area for that. And that's where that discrepancy is on that one last item. Other than that, there were no other comments regarding the engineering work. Now, they didn't really comment about the vernal pool. That was more stuff that was done by Cynthia Rabinowitz from the Northwest Conservation District. And I did download that file, that letter, Neil, and sent it to you. I don't know if you got that.
I did.
Okay. But I think Jim McManus can talk about that. And Jim, I don't know if you got that letter. Did you?
No, I did not.
Okay. I mean, if you want, I can just read it in real quick.
Might make sense.
Okay. It's a letter dated 24th of April from the Northwest Conservation District to David McCollum regarding 9 Good Hill Road. Dear Mr. McCollum, as requested, I have reviewed a letter from Mr. James McManus of JMM Wetland Consulting Services, LLC, regarding his recent inspection of the off-site wetland to the west of 9 Good Hill Road property. His purpose for this investigation was to determine if and to what extent the wetland is a vernal pool. Based on Mr. McManus's findings of suitable vernal pool conditions together with considerable evidence of vernal pool obligate amphibian species, I concur with his conclusion that the wetland is a vernal pool. In considering the potential effect of the proposed development on the vernal pool, I have taken into consideration the following. The extent of the upland habitat currently available in the area surrounding the active vernal pool will remain the same. The watershed currently serving the vernal pool will not be diminished. A small grading change to the engineering plan for the proposed development was made to ensure that drainage to the vernal pool will not be altered from its present status. Large trees close to the western property line on 9 Good Hill Road parcel will remain, and the vegetative buffer will be improved with the addition of evergreen trees. No lighting is proposed behind the buildings at the west side of the property, and there will be no access from the rear of the units. Based on these factors, I see no detriment to the vernal pool from the proposed development. Thank you for the opportunity to assist the Town of Bethel Inland Wetlands Commission in its effort to protect soil and water resources. Cynthia Rabinowitz. So Jim, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
It kind of stands on its own. I visited the site back in March 18th of this year, and I just investigated the entire flooded area, and I found mainly wood frogs, but I did find spotted salamanders too. And as Cynthia said, it's a productive pool, and no surprises. We saw what we anticipated. I can get into numbers if it's even worthwhile, but it's a fairly productive pool, and Mike just read and also said that our development is not going to impact it, and that the habitat, the upland habitat, will be stayed intact because it's off-site of both not only our site but also the neighborhood site. So all the wooded area, I believe, belongs to the church. So all of the upland areas, including the wetlands, will stay as is. So I don't anticipate impacts, as did Cynthia said that as well.
Thank you, Jim. Mike, do you have anything further to add?
I really don't. Unless we want to start reading through the letters back and forth between myself and Wright Pierce, but I don't think that that's necessary unless somebody has a particular question. I'll just probably answer them individually.
I don't think that's necessary, Mike, but thank you.
Okay.
So to conclude for the commission and David, we think that we've substantiated any burden of proof that we had concerning the fact that the development as proposed will not have any negative impacts on the wetlands or watercourses. We feel that the information has been properly vetted by the consultants, and that in reality, from day one, there has been very little dispute or problems in the review of the application from either Wright Pierce or from the Northwest Conservation District. So at this point, if the commission or the public or anybody has any questions, we'll stand by and answer them. But I think we're going to rest on the record that we've submitted.
So
Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Appreciate the input. At this time, we can open the meeting to the public. Again, I remind the public that if you have a question, please raise your hand and you'll be asked to state your name and address and then address your question or comment to the commission.
Okay. I'm going to step in here real quick just in case people don't know how to do that. I see one person has done that already. For those of you that have connected to this meeting by a computer or by a mobile device, there is a toolbar that pops up at the bottom of your screen if you bring your cursor down to it. It has a bunch of Zoom commands, one of which is the participants. It'll have an icon that looks like two people, one standing behind the other. Click on that icon and a whole list of participants that are in this evening's meeting will show up. Clicking next to your name will bring up a list of options, one of which will include raising your hand. Raising your hand will be the only, in this manner, will be the only way that we recognize people to speak through computer or mobile device. If you are calling by telephone, another way to indicate that you want to speak would be pressing *9 on your keypad.
Guy, be quiet, please.
Okay.
Hey, before you begin, Greg Johnston,
Yes,
there was a lot of back noise.
it's not me.
I muted you during the meeting process by process of elimination and found it to be on your end.
I don't see how that's possible.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I may have to do it again during the meeting process, but when it
That's
comes
fine.
time for commission members to speak, I'll unmute you, I promise.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay. So I see one person who has his hand raised. That is Rich Emard. I will unmute you. Just give a test real quick to make sure that we can hear you.
Hello,
And please state your name and address for the record.
my name is Rich Emard. My address is 15 Good Hill Avenue. Good Hill Road, sorry about that. And I also have my master's degree in environmental science and biology.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I begin?
Yes.
Good evening. I would like to submit my report regarding the off-site investigation of the vernal pool adjacent to 9 Good Hill Road. All opinions, statements, recommendations, and critiques will be based and supported by the following: peer-reviewed journal articles, reports, and studies, published strategies, policies, and recommendations from both public associations and federal agencies, documents and statements from both federal and state EPA websites. The findings of the off-site wetland investigation carried out by JMM Wetland Consulting Services provided the only data to date. On completion of this investigation, both James McManus and Cynthia Rabinowitz have concluded that the body of water in question is indeed a viable vernal pool. There were enough obligate species egg masses identified for JMM Consulting to state the following, I quote, "Based on the egg mass count, this vernal pool would be considered a fairly productive breeding habitat, especially for wood frogs," end quote. It should be noted that the data collected was from a single snapshot in time, during only one of the 4 breeding season periods of northeastern vernal pools. The data itself shows that the vast percentage of obligate species egg masses are concentrated in the northern portion of the vernal pool. This section of the vernal pool is in closest proximity to the property of number 9 Good Hill Road. The vernal pool itself is of substantial size. It currently measures 200 feet from the northern to southern boundary and approximately 40 feet across at the widest point from the eastern to western boundary. In my opinion, this evidence strongly indicates the property of number 9 Good Hill Road is an amphibian breeding corridor and a life zone. If If one visit showed such an abundance of obligate species egg masses, what is to say that subsequent field studies during the next 3 breeding sessions would not do the same? Blue spotted salamanders, which are listed as threatened and of special concern, could also be using this vernal pool for breeding. Further field studies would be imperative in determining all of the species with which this vernal pool is used to breed. Raymond Semlich, a herpetologist from the University of Missouri, describes a life zone as the surrounding woodland or upland areas critical to obligate species life cycle completion. This area includes habitat critical to obligate species. Life zone distances for spotted salamanders have been calculated at 650 feet from the edge of the vernal pool. The life zone of wood frogs has been calculated at 2,500 feet from the edge of the vernal pool. Additional studies have stated that salamanders spend the shortest portion of their life cycle in the vernal pool. If not allowed years to mature in upland areas, obligate species will not be able to return to their natal pools to breed. These studies recommend expanding a buffer zone without development of a minimum 750 feet in all directions from the edge of the vernal pool. A consensus on development activities that threaten this life zone include, but are not limited to the following: parking lots, roads, compacted soils, catch basins, temporary holding pools, and cleared lands. All of these activities can alter existing hydrology through layers of the substrate. These activities have been shown to have a negative impact on amphibian breeding populations. Other activities, such as increased lighting, use of silt fencing, and increased noise levels, have also led to higher predation rates and reduced breeding activities. In the case of Post Road Ironworks versus Town of Greenwich, Michael Clemens argued the necessity of juvenile wood frogs in vernal pools. Their presence is critical in maintaining proper nutrient cycles within the vernal pool. Therefore, if wood frog numbers are adversely affected by future development, it will affect the natal pools they breed in as well. Clemens' testimony was essential in the state Supreme Court judge's decision to dismiss an appeal by Post Road Ironworks to develop a site adjacent to these vernal pools. In conclusion, the residents of Good Hill Road would like clarification on certain statements that were made at the public hearing on January 27, 2020. A resident of Good Hill Road voiced an objection to having only one soil scientist, that of the developer, conducting the off-site investigation. The commission assured the resident that there would be multiple site visits, which would include not only James McManus, but also Eric Davidson and Cynthia Rabinowitz. Also, when I recommended that Michael Clemens, an expert in the field of herpetology and vernal pools, be hired, Cynthia Rabinowitz said it would not be necessary. What actually transpired was one site visit by the developer's soil scientist. There is no official correspondence from Eric Davidson, and from her correspondence to the IWC, Cynthia Rabinowitz only reviewed a letter from James McManus. James McManus's conclusion, and I quote, "Wetland functions and values will be preserved at existing levels following development. There will be no adverse physical impacts to the off-site wetland." Cynthia Rabinowitz's conclusion, "I see no detriment to the vernal pools from the proposed development. With all due respect to these soil scientists, these conclusions are contradictory to the recommendations of multiple experts in the field of herpetology and vernal pools cited within this report. Michael Clemens, preeminent herpetologist and vernal pool expert, recommends a minimum of 750 feet of non-development within the life zone. The EPA recommends a 1,000-foot radius beyond the edge of the vernal pool, while also recommending intensive site assessment and studies due to possible habitat fragmentation. Finally, the vernal pool itself is part of a larger ecosystem with synergistic value, which all needs protection. The citizens of Bethel and the Inland Wet Commission need to act as stewards to these essential natural resources. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else from the public who would like to speak?
I see a gentleman by the name of Ryan Cornish that appears that it has his hand raised. I will unmute him if he's not unmuted already. Mr. Cornish?
Hi, I'm unmuted, David. Ryan Cornish, 21 Gidhill Road. I'd just like to state that with the wetlands area in close proximity to two of the borders of number 9, I know we've been talking about the vernal pool at the northern edge, but there is another wetland area also behind number 7. I think it's important, it stands to reason that the location of the building, the size of the parking lot, the 24-hour lighting, which is not directed at the vernal pool, but is directed at the wetland behind number 7. These all have significant impacts on the surrounding wetland. In addition to the vernal pool being a very fertile breeding ground, the silt fencing, curbing, building, parking lot, and all of that provide formidable barriers to all the animals that have bred in the vernal pool to move about and to go about their natural life cycle. While I think it's great that the proposed plan is not going to affect the drainage, the other concern is for the species living in the vernal pool, as I just said. They need to be able to move in their natural patterns, and they need to be able to get out of the vernal pool within, more than the 75 feet from the vernal pool to the edge of the building. I would also like to say, just for the record, I think it's very disappointing that the town hired a soil scientist and she is not here to answer or rebuff any of these questions. She was paid and everything. It's just very disappointing that she's not here to add any value to any of these statements. I guess in closing, I would say we would all love to see the appropriate thing be done here. There's more than enough evidence to have this application be denied, and there's just no reason for this to move forward any further than it already has. Yes, there's a vernal pool, nobody denies that, but nobody has at all assessed the ramifications of the animals living in the vernal pool and their ability to move about and get on with their natural life. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cornish. I don't see any other hands.
Up, there is one more.
There's one there, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm trying. Cage, you're on?
Hello,
Yes, Chris.
Kristen, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, my name is Kristen Duran, and I live at 12 Good Hill Road. And I just wanted to make a comment to the commission, since as Ryan Cornish had stated, Ms. Rabinowitz is not with us this evening to comment and, answer any questions. And Richard Mard had brought up the Michael Clemens, who's a herpetologist. Maybe that is something that we need to look into, since we have different soil scientists. Maybe we need to look at that type of specialist to give an unbiased opinion on number 9. That's my comment.
Any other members of the public like to speak? Okay. David, do you have comments, questions?
I guess this, before I go into my comments, does the commission want to provide the applicants an opportunity to respond to what the public has stated, or do they want me to provide my comments before we go into that?
I would go with the applicant's response.
I would agree.
Thank you.
Okay, again, for the record, Neil Marcus. There are three speakers that we need to address. Mr. Emmer talked about the report from JMM. He read it to us, and I think there's no dispute on what those findings were, but he missed one of the critical parts of that report, which is that in spite of the fact that this vernal pool is an active breeding ground, it's the proposed development of the applicant will have no impact from an inland wetlands perspective on the vernal pool. That's really the issue that the commission is charged to determine under the Connecticut general statutes that protect inland wetlands and create the authority of the commission as the local arm of the DEEP. So he said that the vernal pool is a active breeding ground critical to obligate species. The problem is, and again, here's where sometimes the layperson, even though Mr. Emmer is apparently qualified in biology, but you got to go look at the law. And the problem is that the Connecticut general statutes don't necessarily protect the obligate species. That's not the duty of the Inland Wetlands Commission. The duty of the Inland Wetlands Commission is to protect the wetlands. Whether the species get run over in the road because somebody's ignoring them or whatever really doesn't fall under the auspices of the DEP or the Bethel Inland Wetlands Commission. So he made an impassioned plea for wood frogs, protecting wood frogs and salamanders, and the need for a 750-foot buffer to protect the species. But that's not what we're talking about here. Now, I don't want to diminish what he is concerned about. And by the way, I've worked with Mike Clemens for years on both sides of the issues. I've worked with Mike Clemens when he has felt that a pool would not be impacted by development. And I've worked with Mike Clemens when he's asked for additional setbacks and buffers, because remember, he's a herpetologist and I respect the work that he does. Interestingly enough, years ago, we had a site that Beth might recall over on, I'm trying to remember, over on Maple Avenue, where we had issues dealing with protecting turtles. Now, turtles, again, like wood frogs and salamanders, can rely on a certain environmental condition for their breeding, in their sustenance, in their survival. But again, if it's the purpose of the town of Bethel, for example, to have preserves where animals and salamanders and other types are preserved, then of course they are required to acquire the land to set it aside for that purpose. That's why all of the towns around here have active open space programs. But I think that it's a misconception among the public, and particularly by the comments that were made by the two speakers, that this commission is charged with protecting salamanders and wood frogs. Because to do that, you have to determine that salamanders and wood frogs are necessary for the viability of the wetlands. But in reality, it's the opposite. The wetlands make them viable but the law protects the wetlands and not the species. And there have been a number of cases, we call them, in the environmental litigation field, the salamander cases. And unfortunately, as much as everybody wants salamanders and protects salamanders, the state has not done that unless they're on an endangered species list. The endangered species fall under a whole different set of regulations. So it's wonderful to want a 750-foot buffer, but the place to do that is through either acquiring it from a private landowner or somehow acknowledging that this land will be set aside, but that's not in the Inland Wetlands Act. And if I go then to Mr. Cornish's concern, he says that it's proven that lighting is going to have an impact on the wetlands. In the record before us today, and maybe I missed it, I didn't see that. I didn't see any expert opinion on the lighting impacts on wetlands. And I'm not sure what lighting he's talking about in this application that would arise to that standard of impacting wetlands if that were proven. So I'm not sure where he got it, but he said that the other thing he's worried about is that the construction on my client's property is somehow going to create a barrier to animals that are moving about. And again, that's not the jurisdiction of this commission. And again, I don't mean to say that animals moving about aren't important, but on the other hand, I'd like to focus this commission and not have them misled to thinking that they've got to protect upland species under the guise of wetlands protection or watercourse protection. So he's concerned with the species being able to move in and out of the vernal pool. And then his last comment is he's disappointed that Cynthia Rabinowitz isn't here tonight. I think I started the conversation this evening before the meeting started by kidding with David that I'm disappointed Cynthia's not here either, because quite honestly, I told him I really was attending to be with her. But all kidding aside, Cynthia Rabinowitz is a very qualified scientist in her field. And when she writes, I take it seriously. And she's written here. And she doesn't, I think she does not come from the school that says, if the more you repeat things, the truer they become. That's not true. And I know lawyers who think that sometimes the more we argue the same point, the more it becomes gospel. Not the case. But there's no reason for her to come here tonight and say the same things that she said at the last public hearing where she attended, or in her reports. I mean, the fact of the matter is that that has nothing to do with the quality of the work that she submitted. And God only knows that I'm not trying to defend the experts for the commission. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is to say that these experts have a certain, apply a certain standard, and she's met that. And to say that she's not here tonight is somehow a shortfall for either the commission or the work that she's done is not fair. And then of course the last person says you may need Mike Clemens. That's, you may need Mike Clemens if you want to work on a program for protecting certain species in the town of Bethel. There's probably no one who's more qualified or maybe even as qualified as Mike. But that's not what you need here. What you need is what you've done. What you need is to determine whether there's going to be an impact on this vernal pool. And if there isn't, then your inquiry pretty much stops right there. And you don't really need, as part of this application, to show that there are plans and policies you can put in effect in Bethel to protect wood frogs and salamanders if that's what you want to do. That's what Mike Clemens can help you do. But quite honestly, I'm not sure that he would add much more to the review that has already occurred. So I appreciate the fact that the public has commented, and I appreciate where they're coming from, but unfortunately, I'm not sure that it applies to this application under the circumstances that the record has revealed. And again, I'm not sure if Chuck Anders is still in this meeting or he's not, and I'm certainly not going to put him on the spot. I wouldn't want to do it to anybody. But at some point, if you want to dwell more into these issues, Chuck, I'm sure, could help educate you on the interplay between the species, the wetlands that are being protected, and the Connecticut statutes under which you operate. And that's a good inquiry to make. But for purposes of where we are at this point, I think the record's pretty clear, both on the JMM report and the Cynthia Rabinowitz review, that we've got a vernal pool and it's going to be just as active post-development as it is right now. There's no reason to think that it'll be negatively impacted. So unless Mike or Jim needs to add anything, that's basically where I am on the comments that we've heard.
Jim?
I would just add that when we review vernal pool and habitat, we don't just look at the pool itself. We look at everything that surrounds it. And that pool had been diminished with the construction of the neighborhood. If you look at an aerial photo of the neighborhood, it's sliced right through the woods. So I don't know when the neighborhood was built, but that pool's still active, and it's been active, and it will be active again because the biggest impact to that pool has already happened. And the remaining habitat is going to be there tomorrow because the development site has already been cleared and disturbed, as like the neighborhood. But where the pool is and all the surrounding area that belongs to the church is not going to be impacted at all.
May I interject in regards to this conversation, Ken? I just want to have a clear understanding, and maybe the commission can help me get to where we need to go. I don't think you were at the meeting, Neil. It was, I think, the last public hearing the board had in regards to this discussion that you're having now. At the time, I think there was 3 soil scientists there or 4 soil scientists there. The discussion in regards to Clemens came up. In regards to that, Cynthia stated she didn't think it was necessary to have someone of Clemens' caliber involved. But at the same time, I think the commission was looking for some more expertise in regards to the functions and values of a vernal pool. The soil scientists at the time all kind of agreed that, yes, they thought that this was a potential vernal pool. So I thought there was a good compromise in place between you, the applicant, and the town in regards to that. And that was, at the time, your client was using the services of Eric Davison. Eric Davison is a biologist. He also had worked for Michael Clemens 4 or 5 years. So as far as some of the functions and values of that type of a wetland, we felt it was incumbent on all of us to pursue it even more so than just by having a clearly certified good soil scientist go out there. I'm happy that Cynthia and Jim agreed Cynthia agreed with Jim's report. Unfortunately, she was not on the site with you, Jim, was she?
We couldn't get it, the schedules put together, but
did Eric contribute?
If I found nothing, we would have a more spirited conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Either Eric, Dr. Clemens, Cynthia, if they were all there, we would have seen the same thing, which is a productive pool with many wood frogs and a handful of salamanders. That was the main goal. Is this pool an actual vernal pool certified, or at least has obligate species breeding in it? And number two, is the current proposal going to impact that vernal pool? Those two answers were answered this evening, I think, in my opinion.
Okay, by you as a soil scientist, not by an environmental scientist or by a wildlife biologist that may be more familiar with the habitat, with the pool itself, the potential nutrients that tree frogs or the obligate species deposit there, the growth, things of that nature that have something to do with the hydrology of the pool and making it viable.
Well, all due respect, with 30 years of experience, yeah, I don't have a wildlife biologist letters after my name, but
I understand, Jim.
I know, I'm just saying.
And neither do I. That's why I'm looking for that type of information from people that I respectfully respect your opinion as far as your reports and things of that nature are concerned, but I thought that one way of wrapping this all up was to have that data that you produce be used by a biologist or environmental scientist or a herpetologist to determine that if the activities that were going to take place on the other property, the adjacent property, have an effect on what habitat was contained within that vernal pool and the nutrients that are provided by amphibians or frogs. I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I suggest that, and Eric's seen my report, and he didn't have any comments because he knows, he's seen the pictures, he's seen the report, he obviously has seen the site, and I mean, what else is he going to say? I mean, everybody's going to come to the same conclusion. The site itself has low quality habitat. The neighborhood has put a nail right through the vernal pool for productivity, and what's left is what we have, which is still a pretty darn good vernal pool.
Okay.
With all the habitat around it being left alone. So the neighborhood's not going to change, and the project site is what it is, which has already been disturbed. There's minimal habitat in the site. All the habitat is off-site, in the vernal pool and outside of the vernal pool in the upland habitat.
I'm talking about the vernal pool itself.
Yeah, the vernal pool's fine.
How many visits did you make?
It's an active vernal pool. It has good habitat potential, and it does because we viewed it back in what did I say?
The visit you made to the vernal pool, Jim, was March 18th.
Yep. I'll give you some numbers if you want. I mean, we came up with about 150 to 175 wood frog egg masses and about, say, 4 or 5, maybe 6 spotted salamander egg masses. I came up with 5, 2, 4, 5 on my report. So it's clearly more of a wood frog egg. Though it's interesting to say, I don't know about Bethel, but there's other parts in Connecticut, particularly when I'm working with in Guilford, that for whatever reason, spotted salamanders or egg masses are way, 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 way down this year. I'm not sure why, but it is. So that might have been a reflection. But it certainly has many, many wood frogs, egg masses, and also salamanders spotted.
I'm gonna interject real quick, and just as a reminder, when people speak, before they begin with their comment or their response, they have to identify themselves for the record. I apologize, I didn't do that. I interjected. Dave McCollum, the wetlands agent, but it's just a reminder that you're going to have to do that for the record because we're conducting this meeting through Zoom. To get back on track, Jim, I don't think the point of what we're trying to go for is indicative of what the season was like or what the numbers were. Specifically, I think we're trying to get to the methodology as to why only one visit was conducted when this site could have up to 4 breeding pool seasons, as Mr. Emar indicated.
Jim McManus, for the record. The reason I had one site visit is because it was my understanding that we were trying to determine if this area seasonally flooded area was a vernal pool or wasn't a vernal pool. And I didn't need to go back again because in the March visit, we found more than enough to certify that as an active vernal pool that has obligate species breeding in it. I don't know what else to say. I don't really care what happens the rest of the year. It's still classified as a vernal pool, whether it's breeding now, next week, or
Right. Dave McCollum in the Wetlands Agent. I think the I think it was almost a foregone conclusion, and correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I'm not a wetlands or a soil scientist. It was almost a foregone conclusion that what was going to be seen out there was going to be a vernal pool, just by the indicators that have been given by the public, exhibits that have been submitted. I don't think that would have been a question, and I don't think in any way that is what any of us are contesting. I think it's the viability of the vernal pool that is being questioned, and I think I think the concern is that one visit does not necessarily indicate how the viability, if it does change, fluctuates throughout the year, especially if this is the most active period of the year for a vernal pool. I think an explanation as to seeing how successful any of the species that you initially observed, continued to progress throughout a subsequent visit may have been worthy of note for any report that you submitted. That's what we're trying to ascertain here, Jim. And whatever what comment you have to say about the numbers, like I was saying, we're trying to figure that out. Why a second visit wasn't necessary, or any other visits for that matter.
Jim McManus, it was my understanding that it was just determined if what we thought was a vernal pool was indeed a vernal pool. And the numbers would suggest that this is a fairly productive pool. And with that large raft of egg masses of wood frogs, this is not a hit or miss pool. It's breeding yearly. I didn't feel as though we needed any more visits because the objective was to determine if indeed this was a vernal pool, and if indeed it was, is the proposed activity, proposed development going to impact it? The answer is no, both in a physical way and in a water quality way. This vernal pool is going to be exactly what it is today. It's going to be next year or the following year, because all the impacts to that pool have already happened.
So if you're saying that, Dave McCollum in the Wetlands Agent, if you are saying that the development that occurred previously with the construction of the neighborhood may have adversely impacted what the vernal pool was, what is the thought process that having a development that is closer to the vernal pool wouldn't possibly contribute to any more impact?
Jim McManus, again, because the habitat that those critters are surviving in and living in is intact, and it will stay intact. The proposed site has already been disturbed. There's minimal habitat associated with that site. So the area that they're living and breeding is now is going to stay intact. That's why.
Can I just say something here?
Yes.
Mike Mizuko for the record. And I just want to reiterate that at the previous public hearing, it was decided upon that Jim McManus was perfectly capable of reviewing the resource and determining if it was a vernal pool. And that was the main question. So Cynthia had said that he was perfectly capable of doing it, and Eric was there and he felt the same way. It wasn't like Eric said, no, I better go out there. He felt Jim was more than capable of analyzing whether or not this was a vernal pool or not. And as far as the impact, as Jim has stated, the site is at least where we're working is almost 100% disturbed already. And the more important fact is that the watershed going towards the vernal pool is going to stay intact, and it's very small. The portion of our site that's heading in that direction is very small. And as I said, we're going to keep the same amount of watershed going to that area. We're going to keep it intact. And it's just going to be planted and landscaped. So again, going back to what impact it has, it doesn't have impact. That's the bottom line.
Did you have anything else you wanted to add to that, Jim?
No, I mean, that's it. We've said it a number of times tonight and a number of times at the last meeting. The only difference was from now to then was we didn't know if that was truly a vernal pool. Now we do know, but our conclusions stay the same. As I stated in my report, I haven't changed my conclusion. It's just that now we have a breeding habitat near the site. Okay, we do, and we're not going to impact it.
And I think it would have been helpful, the discussion wouldn't have gone where it's gone now if we all had agreed, if you had listened a little bit closer and understood that what we were agreeing to was to have everybody go out and yes, formally say it's a vernal pool, but at the same time, use the assets that Eric Davidson brings to the table of having him go out with you to really truly understand that, okay, you have 150 tree frog egg masses or whatever you have within the water itself, okay? If that corridor or disturbed area where you're located is now built up and followed through with this development, is there an impact on any kind of juvenile, whatever it is, living in the vernal pool, the nutrients feeding the vernal pool and the actual function of it? Does it diminish? And I feel that having the, of having someone like Eric Davidson, who is a biologist, a wildlife biologist, or a herpetologist, as was suggested, would have been very helpful in order to bring this conversation to a conclusion. And that's all I have to offer.
Can I respond? Mike Mizuko for the record. With regard to Eric Davidson, if you look back into the letters that he had written and commented on, there were a few things that he was concerned about. One was the hydrology, that there was no real large changes to the hydrology. The other one he said was noise and light pollution. And so we don't have any decks or patios in the back of that unit facing the vernal pool. And originally, at your request, Beth, we had shown a playground out there, but by the time we put in the trees and did some grading back there, it just wasn't a suitable area for a playground. And so we eliminated that, and that took away the noise issue from that, along with the fact that there's going to be no decks or patios back there. So those things, I think, were addressed that he had concerns with, Eric Davidson.
For the record, Jim McManus, you know, he's not here to defend it, but we were talking, and as Mike just said, his biggest concerns were those issues. He's never had a concern about the degradation of the vernal pool itself, if indeed it was a vernal pool at that time. We didn't quite know. Those weren't his issues, because he knows, just like I know, that the habitat is off-site and it's staying intact. So I get what you're saying. It would have been nice to have somebody who actually puts in after his name, a couple of letters. But again, I'll say it again for the record, I'm more than qualified to make a decision, particularly at this level, determining something was a vernal pool and then investigating the habitat and the off and on-site habitat and how that all sort of blends together. I'm more than capable of making those decisions.
Dave McCollum, inland wetlands agent. Jim, you had mentioned earlier in this discussion that Eric didn't provide a response that had confirmed your findings from your March 18th, 2020 site visit. Is there a reason why he did not supply any sort of report to reflect that?
Jim McManus, I don't know the answer to that, but he's seen everything that's been submitted. I don't think he felt as though there was a need for it. Because I think he felt the same thing I do, is clearly it's a vernal pool. And as I said before, his concerns weren't about whether the development was going to impact it through water quality or something else, cutting down of trees, opening up the sunlight to the vernal pool, because those aren't happening. I don't think he felt as though he needed to respond. The answers were, the questions that people had were answered with my March site visit and report.
Anything else to add, Mike?
No, just that I concur with Jim with regard to Eric Davidson, because I had sent him plans, and he was happy that we did address the concerns that he had about the light, the noise, and the hydrology. And so once those things were addressed, I think he was okay with saying that there was really going to be no impact to that vernal pool. And we are putting in white pines and evergreen, so there'll be more shading than you would have normally with a deciduous tree.
All right. If the applicant doesn't have any more comments at this moment, Mr. Chairman, I would advise that we try to address some of the public that is patiently waiting to perhaps give additional comment. I'm going to suggest that we open the floor back up to people that have not spoken yet, and then give an opportunity for people that have already spoken to perhaps provide an additional comment.
Ken Stevens for the record. That's fine, David. And if you want to manage the mute and unmute, that would be very helpful.
Okay. Dave McCollum, thank you. First, I am going to unmute. It's Mary Ann Cola.
Right. That's correct. Hi, I'm Mary Ann Kula. I live at 17 Good Hill Road in Bethel, Connecticut. And I take issue with various statements that the wetland isn't going to be impacted. If what has happened last year was 26 loads of dirt were put on what was a very fertile, moist meadow. And then that dirt had to be hauled away. And you have to assume that the intention was to raise the level of the area. But in the process, all the, flowers and that whole field lost its grass. But that could grow back again. And I don't see the frogs and creatures of that wetland saying, oh, here's a stone wall. I won't cross into what used to be a nice grassy area. It's just not the way life works. I don't see how you can put 11 units of housing back there without disrupting the wetlands. So that's my comment.
Thank you. We're going to, let's do, I hope I don't butcher the pronunciation. Richard Mould.
Hi, Rich Mould from 10 Good Hill Road. Thank you for hearing me out. I'd like to reference this file, if you can read it with the light, the Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Regulations for the town of Bethel. And on page 9, there is a definition of significant impact. And my neighbor, Rich Emard, talked about the 750-foot barrier. A couple of things I want to call out. Neil, I apologize that I don't know your last name. It just says Neil's iPad, but Neil mentioned that the Inland Wetlands Commission is not charged to worry about animal life. In the Inland Wetlands Commission bylaws, it says, number 3, any activity which substantially diminishes the natural capacity of an inland wetland or watercourse to support aquatic, plant, or animal life and habitats, prevents flooding, supply water, assimilate waste, facilitate drainage, provide recreation or open space, or perform other functions. That sure sounds to me like something that the Inland Wetlands Commission, and this is just assuming that the Inland Wetlands Commission's bylaws are what the public should be going against. That becomes a major concern. I have 2 others to read from that document. Number 6, any activity which is likely to cause or has the potential to cause pollution or a wetland of a wetland or water course. You have 11 units in this level of proximity. How are you ever going to guarantee that there's not going to be any form of pollution? And then the last piece is number 7, any activity which damages or destroys unique wetland or watercourse areas or such areas having demonstrable scientific or educational value. Richard Emard just talked about the scientific or educational value of the 750-foot barrier. All very important pieces. The last thing that I'll comment on was not to worry about light or noise. Am I to understand that there will be no doors, no windows anywhere in the back of this unit, these 11 units? And if so, how are we going to control 11 units worth of neighbors and their ability to shine lights into that vernal pool? Thank you.
We're going to go for Ryan Cornish.
Hi there. My name is Victoria Cornish, and I live at 21 Good Hill Road with Ryan Cornish. My question is, Mr. McManus referenced that this environmental area has been disturbed, and there is a vernal pool on this area, but the way that he was saying that it was disturbed was in reference to the road already being put in place along with the buildings and houses that are already on it. The homes that are in that surrounding area were built back in 2000, if not previously. So that area hasn't been disturbed for at least 20 years with the building of another home. So I just would like the record to show that. Thank you.
David, this is Ryan Cornish. Can we just go simultaneously?
Yes.
21 Good Hill. So in regards to what Mr. Marcus said back to me, yes, it was not proven that there will be lighting facing the vernal pool. However, there is a second wetland area adjacent to the property behind number 7. And if there is 24-hour lighting, like there is on the building that's on Taylor Avenue, and there's 24-hour lighting in the parking lot, that will affect that other wetland area. How productive of a breeding ground it is, I'm not sure, but there's still going to be lighting facing that wetland area. In terms of when you're building the silt fencing, the actual building, the curbing to the parking lot and stuff, those are all problems that prohibit movement to the species in that area. And if the surrounding development diminishes the population of that vernal pool, it's going to affect adversely the vernal pool. I know he said this isn't a referendum on we have to keep animals safe, but if those animals are used to moving, like Marianne said, throughout that habitat, they're going to continue doing that. And if they do, they will have issues with construction equipment, et cetera, or predatory animals. And I guess my biggest issue, which has been touched on several times, is I know Mr. McManus is a soil scientist, but this whole thing was with the second visit in March was predicated on the fact that the town soil scientist would be there. I'm not saying he's doing anything illicit, but obviously anything he says is going to, if he can at all lean towards the applicant, it's going to lean towards the applicant. It would be awesome, like I said earlier, if our soil scientist was here so we could know why she didn't attend the site visit and why she, and just so we could have her answer any of these questions. Yeah, how the conclusions were drawn, et cetera. I think it's absolutely imperative that you have more than just a soil scientist look into the population of the vernal pool. And I just don't think you can do that with also on just one visit to the site. Thank you.
Mr. Emard?
Yes, David. My name is Rich Emard. I live at 15 Good Hill Road. And this is to address Neil Marcus. I don't know if you were listening closely enough to the case between the Post Road Ironworks versus Town of Greenwich, where it specifically says the presence of wood frogs is critical to maintaining proper nutrient cycles within the vernal pool. So once again, that's the presence of the amphibian, which is critical to the maintenance of the vernal pool, not the other way around. So for clarification, that needs to be noted. And it's not a threatened species that is involved in that. It's actually a wood frog, which there's an abundance of, which Mr. McManus has noted in the record. So if you take those two facts, it is imperative that they are protected because they do influence and maintain portions of the vernal pool. It's an ecosystem. They're both equally important. You can't have one without the other. It's synergy. The sum of their parts is greater than, if you break it down. As far as Mr. McManus, the reason you go for further site visits is because you could find a blue spotted salamander. They are threatened. Can you guarantee that there aren't any blue spotted salamanders with your single site visit? I'd be interested to know if you could. And I think it's negligent to say that the development of an 11 two-bedroom facility with approximately 20 parking spaces isn't going to dramatically affect and disturb the existing buffer zone. I really can't see, and that's more to Mike Mizuko and Neil Marcus and Steve McManus. I mean, I don't know how you can say that building such a structure with probably a 2-lane entrance, because I would assume that you have to have an in and an out, and it has to be wide enough to allow emergency vehicles in there as well. And does there have to be a secondary egress? That's a question I never really thought of. But anyway, building such a large building with all that parking space is going to dramatically affect the existing buffer zone, which is within the 750 feet of the edge of the northern border boundary of the vernal pool. Is it not? Thank you.
Ken Stevens, for the record, I don't see any other raised hands at this point. Anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Marcus, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I guess in the spirit of continuing the debate, which we got to conclude at some point, let me make a couple of quick comments. It's Neil Marcus on behalf of the applicant. And First Lady Marion Cullen, she said she doesn't see how you can put 11 units of housing without disturbing wetlands. Well, I guess I don't know how you answer that question, because apparently she's not experienced in the construction field and watching development. But you can build large buildings if they are properly engineered and if the water is properly directed where it's supposed to go, either to continue to keep flowing towards the wetlands, and if you prohibit septic from, and actually, by the way, septic does provide certain nutrients which might help the wetlands, but if you contain certain buffers from the wetlands with your septic systems and the like, and they're designed under the state statute, state health code. I mean, the fact of the matter is it's done all the time, but here we're not developing in a wetlands or we're not filling wetlands, we're not directly impacting wetlands. This is an upland review. And the fact of the matter is, the reason that we have upland review is to do exactly what she's asked, which is to show that you can do proper construction without having a negative impact on the wetlands. So to answer her question is to say there's nothing in the record before the commission that indicates the contrary. Now, the second speaker quoted your regulations, the definitions of significant impact. And then he talked about the same thing. I don't understand how you won't have pollution from 11 units. Well, the fact of the matter is, as I recall, there's a sewer line that services the neighborhood, and that will protect against some of the issues that we normally worry about with pollution. But the fact of the matter is that there's nothing in the record that indicates that this development will pollute the wetlands or the water courses. And then he's worried about the impact of the development on this 750-foot buffer, the barrier, which doesn't exist, and the barrier itself are not wetlands. So now, at some point, you get into a wetlands, but it's not 750 feet of wetlands that we're trying to protect. So, and again, his comment was he doesn't know how you're going to control light and noise and its effect on the vernal pool. Well, yeah, I can tell you, it's a real easy condition of approval is that no exterior lighting shall directly shine on the vernal pool or in that direction. That's easy. There's no reason to light up the vernal pool, and quite honestly, it's pretty far away to light up in the first place. So some of these comments, they're taking issues that really don't apply, and they're not directly on point. The question from Mrs. Cornish, Victoria Cornish, is, well, the houses that Mike Mizuko and Jim McManus were talking about, that the fact that this whole area with respect to the vernal pool has been impacted by development. The road has been cut through it. But the answer to her question is, is that to the extent that this is still a viable vernal pool after all of that construction, all these years, would indicate that in fact you can build in the upland area and you can do significant building, including road building, and still not kill the vernal pool that you're trying to protect. So her comment is sort of a self-fulfilling answer to her question. It was done years ago, and this is, as Jim has said, a very active pool. And then to Mr. Cornish's continuing comments, that the wetlands, he's concerned about the lighting of additional portions of the wetlands. Wherever we're concerned about exterior lighting, it can be controlled by conditions of approval. Lighting, to the extent it has some provable impact on the wetlands, can be controlled. But he was talking about, you know, that the construction equipment is going to have an impact on the population of the vernal pool. And I mean, that just isn't proven. I mean, for years, heavy equipment came up and down Good Hill. I remember when it was built, a lot of it was built by Costa Sturgeon, and he built there for years. And there's no evidence that that construction equipment had a negative impact on the vernal pool or the population of the vernal pool. And to answer Mr. Emar, the Post Road development, those were clients of mine at one time. I represented Post Road Ironworks many years ago. I am familiar with the case, and I am familiar with the fact that wood frogs can have an impact on the vernal pool. However, the wood frogs themselves are not a protected species, and the fact of the matter is that there's no indication here that the wood frogs are going to be impacted by the construction of 11 units of housing on the uplands. That's the missing link. There's no link there. The duty to go out and spend a great deal of investigation on blue spotted salamanders just isn't there. I mean, we look for species, we look for the evidence, but there's a limit to how much you really have to look at. I think the applicant here has met his burden of investigation. And again, he had the same problem at the end of the comments that Ms. Kula started out with at the beginning. Just don't see how a large building with parking will not affect the 750-foot buffer that, of course, is not a recognized standard under the inland wetlands and watercourse regulations of the town of Bethel. So if you look at the definitions that were cited of significant activity, pollution, affecting the habitat, there's no evidence here because the experts, and again, I don't want to get into another discussion of did we have enough experts and did they do enough review, because there's a suggestion that this vernal pool is larger than the issue of the vernal pool is larger than the study time that was devoted to determining its existence. And at the end of the day, the guy who has said the most important issue, or stated the most important issue, is really Mike Mizuko from an engineering point of view. He's telling you that we're not going to have any impact. The small watershed will continue to supply the necessary water that will maintain this vernal pool in the wetlands towards which it flows. And that's the issue. That's the issue that the commission needs to deal with. So we can debate all evening the what ifs, but at the end of the day, the predominance of the record here, the predominant information favors the finding that this development in the uplands is not, the use of the uplands is not going to have a negative impact on the surrounding wetlands or vernal pool. So that's where we rest, unless there are further comments from Mike and Jim in response to these last 5 or 6 comments from the public.
I'm good right now unless there's something specific.
No, I'm not, I don't have anything else to add, Neil.
Thank you.
Ken Stevens for the record. Thank you, Neil. Appreciate
Thank
your
you,
work.
Ken. Thank you.
Dave, do you have anything further for the applicant?
Yes, I do, and it's not anything to do with the vernal pool at the moment, because I feel we've hashed that discussion out as far as we need to at the moment. My one comment that I would have this evening is for Mr. Mizuko, if you were to go to the report from Wright Pierce Engineering, the one that you received today, if you wanted to follow along, or any report that's before or that includes the Wright Pierce comments dated April 2nd, that you can follow along. I'm looking at comment C2 or C-2, which pertains to the primary treatment or the inclusion or exclusion of a primary treatment practice for the stormwater management system. I understand that between you and our consultants here for the town with Wright Pierce, that there's been some back and forth that has gone into how the system that's proposed can perform the functions that it's proposed to. There is one comment that I have with that, which is the information that I've read, the documents that are available to me, and the main one that I'm referring to is the Stormwater Quality Manual that's from Connecticut DEEP. It indicates that underground infiltration systems have a low or unknown benefit for the pollutant reductions of oils and grease. I just, and I feel like this comment, it's been repeated perhaps since the beginning when we initially reviewed this application last year, but I just don't understand why there's a thought process that an underground infiltration system can perform a function to reduce oils and grease from being a pollutant concern when there's been no other information that's been provided that says that we have site development constraints in terms of why this infiltration system is the only viable treatment system that can work for this site. It's situated underneath an impervious parking lot. I understand that it's only for a residential use, for a parking lot that only has to accommodate 11 units. But the fact is that you are going to have vehicles that, as much as we would like them to be leak proof, they may discharge by accident oils, fluids, what have you, that will make their way through the parking lot. And because of the way the system is designed, it's all going to end up in the bottom of or in the bed of the underground infiltration system, which you indicate in your reports, in your response from March 12th, and I quote, "The primary treatment will be the storage and infiltration of the water quality volume for 1 inch of rainfall," end quote. There's an additional response that goes on with that. But my point is that in the instance that you have a rain event where you have 1 inch of rainfall or greater, those oils, if they're not able to be contained with the underground infiltration system or the level spreader, which succeeds it, I'm just looking for clarification as to how the design will prevent any oils and or grease from ending up in the water course that drains to the north. There's a wetland that is associated with that. It's sourced from an outlet which daylights from a pipe that runs along the northern bounds of the property. If you're looking from Good Hill Road, and I'm aware that you know where this is, Mike, but I'm just saying it for the record, just so that we have it. And I feel like this wetland and this discharge is a function. It's a component that needs to be addressed. I understand that the vernal pool is important, and the indicator species, whether they're facultative or obligate is also important. But I think another important item that we need to address is this. I would advise the commission that we have the applicant provide some kind of response as to, what's preventing another item be incorporated into the stormwater management system, which could provide a primary treatment practice where oils and greases could be effectively captured and removed to be eliminated as a concern from impacting the wetland.
Well, I think, David, first of all, Mike Wazuka for the record. I think the reality is with regard to oils and greases, you don't get many greases. Greases are very heavy. They stay on the car. You might get some oils that they'll leak off. You find that most of the time you get problems with oil leakage when you have cars, say in like the Dunkin' Donuts, where they're sitting in, they pull in, they're running, they're sitting there, they're waiting for a meal or a cup of coffee in line. And you can see, you look out, you see oil drippings all over the place. But in a normal parking lot, you're just really not seeing it. So the volume that you think you're talking about or you're envisioning is not there. Now, we do have oil hoods on the catch basin. So if by chance there is something that lets go, and it does happen from time to time, but in a residential situation like this, it's just not there. So, like I said, we do have the oil hoods on the catch basins in the parking lots. And yeah, we do have treatment in terms of water quality infiltration. That's a water quality volume that was required. That takes up roughly a 1-inch rainstorm event. And then from there, you get the attenuation with the detention system. And then outlets into a level spreader infiltration trench, which was designed for a couple of reasons. One, to try to get the water back into the ground and to spread it out to sort of replicate the flow that was going across that entire property prior to development. We're just trying to keep the impact as low as possible. So you're getting the infiltration sort of in two different locations, if you will. Aside from, what else can you do with the catch basin? That's how if you go up Good Hill Road, all the catch basins run down to the outlet that you're talking about, have no oil hoods, no protection, no provisions to capture greases and oils, and that's the way it is. Look on any major highway road, arterial major collector road, they're all the same.
Right. Dave McCollum, in the wetlands agent. Right. That may be the case for roads where cars are traveling. But this is an instance where cars are stationary, where they won't be moving. And if there is a leak, it's not going to go anywhere apart from where the car is apart, and it's still going to go into that system. And then I guess that the more important question is what happens to items such as oil and grease when the rain event exceeds 1 inch of rainfall?
Well, the oils will float, and that's what the oil hoods do in the catch basins. So the oil floats and it'll stay in the catch basin if there is a leak.
And they're designed, you are saying that they are designed to prevent oils from traveling any further into the stormwater management system?
Well, they're like a baffle. They're a baffle over the end of the pipe. So the water's in the basin, the oils stay on top, and then it has to go underneath the baffle into the outlet of the pipe to get into the drainage system.
Dave McCollum, and where does the manual substantiate that the catch basins can provide a primary treatment practice?
Well, you're talking about oils in primary treatment. That's a little bit two different things. So if you're trying to capture the oils, then that's how you can either use the hoods, or you can get more dramatic with oil water separator. But
right.
But you're talking about oils.
Right. But so oils and grease, whatever fluids that may come from any source where you would have the risk of having either the function of the catch basins or the underground infiltration system being compromised. That's what I'm trying to address.
Right, and that would be either with a oil hood or an oil water separator.
Right, and Dave McCollum, and my question is are there any constraints to the site that would otherwise prevent a separator from being installed?
No, you can put an oil water separator in. You can put it right after each catch basin or incorporate it into the catch basin itself.
Meeting is tonight.
I don't know who's speaking in the background. I'm going to try to make sure people are muted here. My apologies. Dave McCollum in the wetlands agent. So are you saying that an oil water separator could be installed or it could be incorporated as a condition of approval if the commission were to be amenable to granting an approval for this, Mike?
Yes, that's possible.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that comment was addressed.
Yeah, I mean, it's my opinion that it's not needed, but if the commission feels otherwise, and I don't know if Tim's on and will speak, but you know, he's the owner and applicant, but I'm almost certain that he would say he would be willing to put, you know, you only need 2 of them down at the parking area. The other one on the other end is very small. You don't need anything up there. There's no cars parking there. It's just an entrance to get into the site, but there's 2 catch basins in the lower area where the parking areas are generally draining to.
Ken, Dave McCollum, and the wetlands agent. Ken, I don't have any more comments. Ken?
To me, I've lost all sound. I'm sorry.
You're back now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. David, what was your question? I didn't hear it.
I was just saying I didn't have any further comments.
Thank you very much. Does anyone on the commission have any questions for the applicants or the applicants' representatives at this meeting?
Hi, I'm not sure if anyone else on the commission does. I do have a few questions.
Go right ahead.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, Pat Parafort, commission member. I apologize. I couldn't see how to, there was no raise my hand button this time around. I do not know why. Just a couple things. So looking at the foot candle grid, I believe it's called, it doesn't show any light source in back of the building. So, and I'm sure that could be made as a stipulation if so approved. I also don't see any decks or anything on the back of these buildings towards a vernal pool. Again, I'm sure that could be made as a stipulation if approved. I do have to disagree with Attorney Neil Marcus. Under the purposes of the Wetland Commission, which is on page 1, I know Mr. Mold cited some, I believe it was on page 9 or so, but under the purposes, it says regulations have been adopted by the Inland Wetland Commission of the town of Bethel in order to, and 1D says preventing loss of fish and other beneficial aquatic organisms, wildlife, and vegetation, and the destruction of natural habitats thereof. It doesn't say anything about endangered species. The question for myself would be, is this a natural habitat, the 750-foot buffer there? So I was wondering, 750 feet is to the building or is it to the disturbance? And if it is not, what is the distance from the vernal pool, which definitely understand it's a vernal pool, everyone says that, This is from the vernal pool to the disturbance. Other comments I have, Mr. McManus, I believe it was, cited that this vernal pool's already has been affected by construction that's gone on there. In fact, I believe, and I'm paraphrasing, I didn't have time to write it down, it drove a nail right through this vernal pool and it survived that. My question is, just looking on Google Earth, and again, it may be deceiving, that construction was farther away than the current construction is. How is it that, and I believe Mr. Marcus, Attorney Marcus cited as well, that had a negative effect on the vernal pool. How is that being farther away having a negative effect, but this building or this proposed use would not? I'm sorry, I'm just going over some notes I have here. I understand that some material was brought onto the site and removed. I would like to know how many yards of material that was in question there. And Mr. and I believe it's Iman cited some studies. I was wondering if it's possible to get those studies or copies of them submitted for review again. I believe there were some federal studies, governmental studies, and some type of suit with Greenwich. I would like to be able to review them for their opinions as well. And last questions, this is, and I'm sorry I'm bad with his name, right, Bitteritz, I believe. Is there a reason she did not attend Mr. McManus? Was it a scheduling conflict? Was there an attempt to come out to the site together? Or I'm just wondering what blocked, I might have missed that, but I was wondering what blocked her. Again, block's a strong term. What prevented her from doing so, with her scheduling, your scheduling, or just if she felt there was no need to? That's all the questions I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Any other questions from the commission before the applicant should respond? Okay, where do we want to start? Mr. Marcus, Mr. Mizuko?
Yeah, again, it's Neil Marcus. I think I'm going to defer to Mike on the main question, the distance from the vernal pool to the disturbance. He might be able to give us that.
Oh, all right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Mike Mizuko for the record. So it's from the vernal pool, which is a little bit beyond where the wetland is, correct, Jim? Is Jim there?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What was the question? Sorry, Mike.
The question is, the actual edge of the vernal pool, is it maybe 10 feet beyond the edge of the wetlands, would you say?
That's right. Yeah, it goes, it's not at the flag boundary, if you will. It goes into the deeper spots.
Okay.
Got to add another, 10 or 15 or 20 feet.
All right. So roughly it's about 65 feet to the property line, which is, you can say that's a limit of disturbance where we're planting the trees. And it's about 95 feet to the actual building from the vernal pool. And while I'm still on, I can comment on the comment about the previous development. And the issue with the previous development, with the impact on the vernal pool, is that a lot of that development was located up gradient or within the watershed. And the road actually removed part of the watershed that was draining to the vernal pool. If you look, I can share my, see if I can do that here without too much problem. Host disabled print share screening. Anyway, what I was going to show you is on the watershed map, you can see where the actual road cuts across the watershed that had originally drained towards the vernal pool. And that's, that does happen from time to time, when you're doing development. sometimes hard to avoid. But essentially what happens is you take all that watershed that's above the road that was draining across the property before it was developed. Now it hits the drainage system and now is running down Good Hill Road and is discharging to the point that's just north of our property. So that watershed was diverted around and is now not going to the vernal pool. Now you could say that, well, they replaced some of it with the development because now you got impervious surfaces, but the fact of the matter is the watershed becomes smaller.
Dave McCollum in the Wetlands agent. Can I just want to interrupt, Mike. I'm sorry. I just gave everyone screen sharing capabilities. So if you wanted to share what was on your screen, you now have the opportunity to do that.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, Jim McManus, I can answer one question while you're getting your screen.
Okay.
About Cynthia. We couldn't get our schedules together, and then with the whole COVID thing, things got a little disrupted. But however, I can't speak for her, but once she saw my report, there was really no need for all of us to get together, because the question was answered. Is this a vernal pool, and what kind of a vernal pool was it, or is it? And we made a decision. So that decision was made without her having to, get out during a shutdown. So.
All right, so can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So if you can you see the hand?
Yep.
My mouse. So you can see where the area equals 1.85 acres. That's essentially where the vernal pool is. I'll just slide that down. You can see the wetlands line that goes around it. Now, I'm just going to slide this up a little bit. You can see where, as you go up, where the watershed right now ends at the edge of the road. But that watershed continued on up towards the bottom of the page where my hand is, but has been cut off because, now you have the road going down. This is Good Hill Road. The contours, you can see them all changed and running, perpendicular to the length of the road. So this area all above here is now going down the road and then hits the drainage system here, crosses over, and then runs down to this discharge point here. All right.
Can we still, can you still hear us, Ken?
I can now, yes.
Okay. Do any of the other commissioners have any other questions? I'll unmute you in the instance you do.
Doesn't appear that we do.
Okay.
You want to let Chuck speak?
Yes.
My next, right off the tip of my tongue, Beth. Thank you.
All right, Ken.
There you go.
Chuck Andrus, attorney for the commission. I have a question about whether the public hearing will be continued. That's the main question, and the reason being that the engineer's report, the Wright Pierce engineering report, wasn't filed within 24 hours, which is under the executive order. You're supposed to do that. There's been a couple of other points that have been made that might be helpful in the event that to address in the event that it is continued. There was some questions about whether Mr. Davidson agreed with Mr. McManus. Perhaps he could either attend or provide a written comment, whether he concurs with the comments of Mr. McManus and some other things. So that's my main question. I'm happy to address issues about jurisdiction and impacts on jurisdiction over wildlife and things like that, if the commission have any questions about that as well. that those questions have arisen, and I'm happy to address those.
Ken Stevens for the record. Thank you, Chuck. At least on my screen, it looks as though you've finished speaking.
Okay.
David, I don't know the official statement to make that we would like to have this meeting remain open until the May 18th meeting.
Well, I think we need to get a consensus from the commission members as to whether or not they think there's any information that needs to be added to the record before the commission can close this this hearing. I think that's why, if anything, their comment or any other comments that they have, now would be the time to discuss those with Chuck, so that we can determine whether or not we can close this hearing tonight, or we would continue it to our next regular meeting on May 18th.
I think that Chuck clearly indicated that it's probably in the best interest of the board to continue the hearing until your next meeting, which is on the 18th. Due to some of the comments that were made, I think Mr. Emard made reference to some materials or something that he spoke about. I think he wanted to put them in the record, if I remember correctly. The Wright Pierce memo, it's basically a matter of, let's see what we can put together before the next meeting that would be helpful before the hearing closes, so you can make a good decision.
David?
Yes.
Or Ken, actually. I
Yeah,
do actually have, yeah, this is Peter Stomardik. I'm the vice chair. I do have one specific question, and I guess it's because of all the different input we're getting from all the different attorneys. What's the chances of us getting the soil scientists, the environmental scientists, whatever scientists we have all together at the same time, so they can give a comment all at the same time, so we know that they're at least collaborating on a decision by the next meeting? Is that possible?
Dave McCollum, in the wetlands agent, yeah, we can request, I can make a request for Cynthia Rabinowitz, the consulting soil scientist for the town, to partake in the next meeting that we have on the 18th, should the commission continue this hearing. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Again, Peter Stomardik, I think it's really important that we hear from all of them at the same time, so everybody has equal input instead of us hearing from one person and not hearing from the other one, and we get conflicting opinions about what's important and what's not important. So I clearly would like to have all of them together at the next meeting. That's all I got.
I have a
Thank you,
question, Dave.
Peter. Go ahead, Lou.
Dave, is there any chances there's going to be any kind of blasting going on down there with some of the rocks, or if so, how close will it be to the wetlands?
That would be Dave
Mike
McCollum,
Mizuko for the
wetlands
record.
agent. That would be a question for the applicant.
Yes, Mike Mizuko. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah,
We hear you.
Yes.
Oh, okay, because I just said the thing said my internet was unstable, so I've been having some issues the last couple of days. So with regard to blasting, and I think I've said this in the record at least a couple of times, that there is no blasting anticipated. Much of the site's going to be raised up. All the buildings are on slabs, and so therefore we do not expect any blasting. There is a rock outcrop on the northwest corner, but our slabs are above that. So again, we don't anticipate any blasting.
Thank you.
Dave McCollum, in the wetlands agent, we really should have a consensus from the remaining commission members as to whether or not we need to keep this hearing open. So far, we've heard from Ken and Peter. Pat Parafort, Greg Johnston, Patricia Sell, and if I'm missing one more, because I feel like I am, we need comments from you, because we should have a complete agreement one way or another as to whether or not we continue this hearing.
David,
Yep.
can you hear me? It's Greg Johnston, Commissioner. I would motion that we continue to the next meeting so that we could have all the information presented before us before we would make a decision. And again, I believe our attorney, Charles, had mentioned that something wasn't filed in time per statute because we're having the meetings on Zoom. So why not just push it to the next meeting so that everything's, correct?
Pat Parafort, Commissioner, agree 100% with what Greg just stated, and we should extend the meeting.
Lou?
I agree with that 100%.
Peter,
Can I ask a legal question? Is there any time limits as far as the public hearing can stay open?
Dave McCollum in the Wetlands agent, I can speak to that, and I'm sure.
Excuse me, David, let counsel speak in regards to that.
Okay.
Excuse me, Miss Beth.
Sure. I'm sure Dave could have answered. Chuck Andrus, attorney for the commission. The answer is yes, there is a limit. We were near the end of the limit because remember we opened the hearing at the January meeting. However, because of the COVID crisis and the executive orders, the governor granted the commission an extra 90 days so that we are within that time frame by continuing, well within the time frame by continuing the public hearing to the 18th. And we can use that at any stage of the proceeding. We could use, if we need additional time to decide, we can use that 90 days for that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Very much.
Neil Marcus, that is in fact correct. The governor has extended and granted the 90-day continuance.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Patricia, are you in support of the continuation of the hearing till our next meeting?
Yes, it seems like several people wanted Cynthia present, so I hope she can attend in 2 weeks.
Ken Stevens for the record. David, I believe that covers all the commissioners. We have a
Yes, I
motion.
believe so.
Can I ask for a clarification?
Yeah, we have a motion on the table.
Excuse me,
I'm
Ken,
sorry.
you don't have to make a motion. You can just continue the public hearing. But this is Beth Cavagna. I just want a clarification on the next meeting besides the reports and such that people are talking about that have been submitted or they want to submit. When you talk about the soil scientists coming to the next meeting, you're talking about Eric Davidson, you're talking about Jim McManus and Cynthia Rabinowitz, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
My understanding. Ken Stevens for the record. That's my understanding, Beth.
Okay. And as far as the Good Hill Road residents, you don't need the, I cannot remember his name, their representative who was a soil scientist also. Neil, what was his name?
Dr. Danzer.
Thank you. Dr. Danzer. You don't need Dr. Danzer there. I'm just asking so we have a very clear understanding of who you would like in attendance. Okay. The answer is no. Yes?
The commissioners need to respond to that.
Greg Johnston, Commissioner. I would think that we would have Dr. Danzer participate. He was part of the whole, the public hired him. So I think he should be here to represent the public side.
Fine with me.
Yeah, this is Peter Samardik, Vice Chair. I agree with Greg as well. It's like if we keep bringing up Dr. Danzer, or the public does, he ought to be heard at the same time as well. So, and I guess if he doesn't show up, or if any of the participants that we looked at their input from doesn't show up, then we don't consider it, I guess. I mean, it's important for them to be there. So I'm with a yes for Dr. Danzer as well.
Okay, so you want to extend the invitation to everybody that you started with basically to begin with, correct?
I think all parties involved should go, yeah.
Okay.
This way, put
All
a
right,
closure
that's
to
all.
it, yeah.
I just wanted to be clear. All right, thank you.
So I believe we have a consensus among the commission to continue this hearing to our May the 18th meeting for additional information to be presented and discussion.
So that concludes the discussion for tonight's agenda pertaining to 9 Good Hill Road.
Your next item on the agenda is?
104 Worcester Street.
Okay.
I can hear again, thank you.
Can you still hear us, Ken?
And now, yes. Who's representing for 104 Worcester Street?
Excuse me, Chuck Anders, for attorney for the commission. I'm going to step away if that's okay. Or do you want me here for anything else? I'm happy to stay.
Beth, Dave McCollum, in the Wetlands agent. Beth, I'm going to defer to you, but I don't think there is any other pressing business where Chuck would have to be around for discussion this evening.
Ken, can I ask you a question in regards to Shelley Woods, Shelley Road? I believe you have a resolution that you're going to be discussing later on this evening. And my only question to you is, are you going to need Chuck to be in attendance?
I don't believe we do.
Chuck Anders for the commission. Beth, do you have my cell phone number?
I believe I do.
Yes, just text me if you do, and I'll come right back on.
Okay, very good.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay,
thank you, Chuck.
Right.
Okay. Applicant for 104 Worcester Street. Continuation of the public hearing originally opened on February the 24th.
Are we ready to proceed?
We are.
Oh, okay. For the record, Neil Marcus, Coda Wolf PC, 158 Deer Hill Avenue, on behalf of the applicant. Is Merrick, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, and Jim, you're still here?
Yes, I am.
Okay. When we last visited this application, there was a question about recertifying the wetlands. It just seems so long ago, but that was, I think, where we left off. So we asked Jim McManus to go out and recertify wetlands that had been marked many years ago, and to come up with a report. And I hope the commission has received that information. Is that correct?
Well, I'm apologize. Is that a question directed to me, Neil? I'm sorry.
Yeah, David, it's more you than anybody else.
Okay. We received, if your question was whether or not we received the reports from Merrick Kemet, yes, we received 4 documents before the close of business last Friday, May 1st.
Okay. And did that include the work that was done by Jim?
I can go into my email or I can go into the Google Drive and indicate to you what those documents include, which was the following. For the record, Dave McCollum, the Wetlands agent. We received on Friday a report from JMM Wetlands Consulting Services, LLC, dated April 27, 2020, addressed to the Town of Bethel Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission, Wetlands Assessment / Impact Analysis, 104 Worcester Street, Bethel, Connecticut. We also received an updated general permit plan, revision date May 1st, prepared for All Regional Recyclers of Wood, LLC, prepared by Anchor Engineering Services, Inc. I believe we also received 2 other documents, one of which was a locational survey produced by CCA, and the date on that survey is April 22nd, 2020. The last document that we received was an Anchor Engineering Services response dated May 1st, 2020. And that was from Mr. Merrick Kement.
Yeah, and I think those, if I'm correct, David, a lot of those responses were to questions that you had raised in your report. Is that?
The Dave McCollum in the Wetlands agent. The comments that are supplied by Mr. Kement, there are only 5 responses for which he provides, which yeah. which I was expecting to receive more responses in the form of my comments that were dated February 2020, my memorandum to the commission, and my WORT review. I thought I would have received a response in that format, but I'm assuming that the some of the responses were meant to be addressed by the reports prepared by Mr. McManus and the survey that was prepared by CCA.
That was the intent. You're right, David. Merrick Kement, Anchor Engineering.
So at this point, without going back and representing, even though it was months ago that we started, without representing the entire plan for the site, I mean, we're limited, of course, directed. The issue is the wetlands impacts. So recalling that we have a currently developed site for which prior permits were issued many years ago for the recycling project that goes on there, or the recycling that goes on there today for wood and wood products. Obviously, the commission knows that the purpose of this application is to do an 8,000 square foot metal building at the top of the site, and to do significant improvements for drainage and for infiltration of water and handling water that would be taken, which would be created by new impervious surfaces. So the focus, I think, of tonight's session should be really on whether the reports that we have submitted have answered any of the questions of the commission and its staff. And if you would like, we could ask Merrick to, or Jim to go through what they've answered first, and then see if that handles all your questions, or we can just stand by and see if you have any further questions if you've read the material. So we'll take the cue, Mr. Chairman, from you as to how you'd like us to proceed.
I would prefer at this point to have at least a short summary.
Okay.
If that's okay with you.
Yeah. The underlying word is short.
Yes, it is.
Excuse me, but this is Beth Cavagna. I just want to put Patrick Pierrefort on the record. I believe that he's recused himself from this hearing, and I don't recall that statement being made.
That statement was made at a previous hearing, but if Mr. Pierrefort is available, it wouldn't hurt for him to reiterate that for this meeting.
Yes, I am recused.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. All right, Merrick Kement of Anchor Engineering. What I want to do is just go through a brief recap of the existing conditions and what we're proposing, and the effects of the new delineation has caused on this project. The existing site on Worcester Street is approximately 7.7 acres in the industrial zone, with adjacent wetlands located to the west and east of the activity. The existing use, as we know, is a wood processing facility with operations of shredding, grinding, and chipping wood product. With existing improvements that include parking, there's an office trailer on site, on-site processing and storage areas, as well as utility services, which includes a fire hydrant on site and a subsurface drainage system, which currently outlets to the western portion of the property towards the wetlands in the rear. Due to, if you have the map in front of you, but have seen it, I can also share it and point to it if necessary. The newly delineated wetlands is actually less of an impact than originally anticipated from the Roy Shook delineation back in 2004, and also through the wetlands mitigation that occurred in 2009. With the scaled back wetlands, which also therefore scales back the 100-foot upland review area, the project improvements that we're proposing with this will be a addition of an 8,000 square foot building located on the western end of the property. Only a portion of that will be about 40 feet within the upland review area, which includes the concrete bollards, a roof drainage system, pavement landing, and foundation installation. We're also formalizing the existing storage areas of the existing wood facility operation that's occurring on site now. We're going to be installing a metal beam rail on the western edge of the property, and also just the traditional site grading and turf establishment in that area due to the project, as well as installation of erosion and sediment control measures. So with that said, I don't know if you have the capability of looking at the plans in front of you. You can see that the upland review area has scaled back, so you can actually see the impact or the activity that we're actually proposing. Much of it is outside of the upland review area.
Would you be able to share your screen on that for those of us who don't have the plans in front of us at the moment? Ken Stevens, for the record. Thank you.
Can you see that now?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Yes, very good.
Bear with me. Okay, can you see that now?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So we're looking at where my arrow is pointing. This is the newly delineated line done by Jim, outlining right here. The previous line prior to the wetlands mitigation occurred in this area right up here. So a significant decrease.
Merrick, I don't mean to interject. Dave McCollum, the wetlands agent. We cannot see your cursor, or at least I cannot see your
I
cursor.
can't see it either.
You
I was just going to mention that. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
We could see the plan, but we can't see your cursor moving.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is, can I interrupt just for a second? This is Peter Samardak, Vice Chair. The plan that I'm looking at, it's got a date of 9/21/2018. Is that correct?
No, the plan is a revised plan dated May 1st, 2020.
Dave McCollum, the wetlands agent. Peter, next, there's the day 9/21/18 is when the plans were originally prepared. You're looking for a revision box that's to the left of that. That has the date of May 1st, 2020.
Oh, it's Peter again. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, we got Merrick's cursor now. I can see it.
You see this?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the new wetlands delineation line done by Jim McManus. And this is the old line done by Roy Shook back in 2004. With the new line, you can see the 100-foot upland review area is shown by the dashed line. And that is the wetlands located to the east of the property. On the west property, there is a wetlands limit at the base of or the toe of the slope that's existing out there with its 100-foot upland review area shown right up here. So the majority of the activity is primarily located outside of the upland review area, up in the uplands. The section that is within the upland review area is a portion of the building in here, as well as the wood processing material and associated grading. And that's all I have as a brief introduction, and I can obviously honor any questions that come up.
Thank you. Thank you. If you can unshare your screen. There we go. Okay. So at this time, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, I would like to open the floor to those members of the public who may have some questions for Mr. Kemet or Mr. Marcus.
Dave McCollum, Inland Wetlands Agent. In the instance that anyone has joined this meeting following when we opened it at 7 o'clock, the way to indicate that you wish to contribute public or to the public participation is with the raise your hand capability through Zoom. How you get to that is to go to the toolbar on the bottom of the Zoom app screen, where you'll see the figure of two people, one standing behind the other, which is the participants tab. Click on that tab, and then a participant's chat box will show up on the right-hand side of your screen. There you will select your name from the list of participants, and in doing so, there will be an option for you to raise your hand. So the other option, if you are participating by telephone, is to press *9 on your keypad. And I'm not seeing anyone that wants to contribute to public participation apart from, yes, we have one. Dirk Parafort?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, Dirk Parafort, 71 Worcester Street. My main concern really, and I apologize if some of this may have been covered in the first part of the hearing, but in prior hearings on this application before zoning, I know the applicant had cited that there's really no way to stop certain hazardous materials from coming onto the site from construction debris. I think at the time he said, what people throw in containers, they throw into containers. I've been on a lot of construction sites myself over the years. I've seen everything from empty paint cans to oil cans to paint thinner to you name it, pretty much thrown into those things before they're hauled off. So that brings me basically to my next question in terms of how the water discharge is going to be handled from this site. Basically, from what I have seen and heard from the plans, it appears that it was like a vortex type system that I think was going to discharge near the wetland zone. For what I understand from vortex systems, they are mostly catch solids. I don't think they catch all the solids, only maybe 2/3 or 3/4 of the solids. And I'm also curious in terms of because they don't catch the solubles, the paint thinners, the paint, the oil, all those other materials that are come in off construction sites in containers. How is that material going to be addressed and make sure that none of that runs off into the wetland areas and or, you know, once it goes through that drainage, that it doesn't get discharged. Any of those potentially hazardous materials get discharged into the wetland zone. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone else? Okay, if there's no other questions, the applicant like to respond, please.
Merrick Kennett, Anchor Engineering. Basically, the material coming in is directly going to be dumped, or the tipping floor will be directly inside the building. From there, the material is sorted and staged and then put into proper containers, which will then be transported off-site to a different solid waste facility for disposal or further recycling. As far as collecting water from the site, the stormwater drainage system is going to be going through a hydrodynamic separator, which catches the oils, sediments, and debris. Basically, this unit will still be designed to remove 80% of the total suspended solids. And what's happening is from there, it'll be going into the existing storm drainage system, which currently discharges to the western end of the property. So we're not creating a new discharge point. We're not increasing flows to that discharge point. We're just treating the water prior to going to that subsurface drainage system. The roof water will be going directly into a catch basin and into the subsurface drainage system. That water does not have to be treated because it is considered clean water. There's no pollutants involved with rainwater, so that is connected directly to the existing storm drainage system that's on site. And anything inside the building, we are proposing separate drains for that collection of any possible water due to rain events, or even in the case there was a water discharge or sprinkler system or something happening inside, that would be collected within the drainage system and then discharged to the existing holding tank that's on site, which would then be pumped out to a separate disposal facility off-site. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kemet. Ken Stevens for the record. Any other public participation? Any questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, this is Peter again, the Samardak, the vice chair. I have a quick question for you, Mr. Kemet. You said that 80% of the solid waste is going to be eliminated from the things that are within that building in the way of runoff. So that goes back into the discharge into the wetlands. So does that say that 20% of the solids are going to be discharged in the back?
Americam and Anchor Engineering, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that 80% is what's required by the Connecticut Deep to be treated. And that's what the system is being designed on, is based on the drainage manual set forth by the state of Connecticut.
I guess, again, this is Peter Samardak. I guess my concern still is that there's going to be, so we're only treating it up to 80%. There's still going to be a discharge directly back into the wetlands.
Americam and Anchor Engineering, yes, there is. That's what's there currently now, is a discharge towards the wetlands. And what's on site now is not being treated at all. So currently there is no treatment that's happening within the system. What we're proposing is we're actually adding this treatment facility for any stormwater runoff. And that is, you know, a more stormwater management that's better for the site, in fact.
Okay, this is Peter. So you're changing your format, though, of the solids that are going to be treated there. Currently, it's just wood products that are being taken care of with the runoff. Now we're talking about products that could contain asbestos or some other kind of solid toxin that could go back into that wetland.
Americam and Anchor Engineering, no, that's not what we're saying. Any product coming in is going directly into the building. There's nothing being dumped on the grounds outside of that building. Nothing is going to be dumped. That's outside of that building.
All right, thank you.
Ken Stevens for the record. Any other questions from the commission? David, any questions from our inland wetland agent?
Dave McCollum, in the wetlands agent. Before I speak, there appears to be one comment from the public, or one question from the public to the commission, which I'll have them briefly address before I go into my comments.
Hi, this is Mary Ann Kula. I'm here on behalf of the Bethel Land Trust. And I'm getting confused about where the wastewater is going, because you have wetlands behind the building and wetlands on the side. Could we clarify that?
Marichem at Anchor Engineering. I'm unclear of as what you're determining as wastewater. If it's anything within the building, it will be transported or it will be contained within a holding tank and then discharged off site. If it has to do with on-site septic waste, we're also going to be treating that through a holding tank on site, which will be pumped out regularly. Outside of that, there is no anticipated waste going to be discharged into the storm drainage system or towards the wetlands. Any paper products or leaf litter or anything like that, we have installed a metal beam rail in the back, so there's going to be no pushing of any accidentally material going over that bank. We have put that rail there. I believe that was something that was discussed back in a prior planning and zoning meeting. So we did incorporate this as part of the design.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
In Dave McCollum, in the wetlands agent, for if there is anyone else that wishes to provide any additional public participation, please address your comments to the commission instead of to the applicant directly. I see there's one left, and then I'm going to get into my comments after that.
Yes, hi. Excuse me, Dirk Parafort again from 71 Worcester Street. Excuse me. I think, again, I just want to reiterate the concern. While it seems like they're taking some of the septic and some of the materials from inside the building and having them dealt with off-site, I mean, we are looking at a building that I believe the plans show is only is open on one side. It's only a 3-sided building. There's also several storage units and containers outside of the facility. I'm assuming those storage containers probably don't have their own drains that would drain into this catch-all system underneath the building. So my concern is that any runoff that comes out of the building, any runoff on a property from the trucks that are coming in and out with the construction debris, you know, as well as any materials that may seep out of the storage containers that have construction debris, all that runoff that's going to be essentially discharged into the wetland. I think, as you stated before, 20% of the solids will not be caught by the current system. The one question I had remaining is if that system would also catch any of the solubles, such as, you know, antifreeze, you know, any other, you know, soluble chemicals, would those be treated as well before discharge into the wetland? Or are we just going to pump all of that stuff, you know, direct from the runoff right into the wetland next door? Because, you know, I've seen a lot of construction containers over the years, and I've worked a lot of construction sites, and I guarantee you construction workers will throw anything they can in there, especially the hazardous stuff that's difficult to get rid of. So I'm very concerned about that stuff leaching out and running off into the waterland. So if you could address how those solubles would be filtered out and not get into from the runoff into the wetland, adjoining wetland, I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much.
if I may, Merrick Kemet, Anchor Engineering. Not to beat this, too much further, but anything coming out of the building will be caught by drains prior to discharging outside of the building, which will be caught and discharged to a holding tank. So nothing is going to be discharged directly to wetlands from the building. Any other items such as oil or antifreeze, as mentioned, is going to be directed to the stormwater treatment facility structure that's on site, which is going to hold back that oil or unwanted discharge prior to getting into that storm drainage system. So I can't reiterate that too much any further. And also the containers outside are all covered. That's a requirement by the Connecticut Deep for this type of facility, that all the containers need to be covered, handling the recyclables. So no water is going to be caught in those containers or discharged onto the grounds from those containers.
David, am I unmuted for a moment? Hello?
We can hear you, Mr. Marcus.
Okay,
You're
thanks. Again, Neil Marcus, in response to the question of the water treatment, I think, we're mixing apples and bananas here. The treatment system, hopefully Merrick had nailed it on the last comment. The treatment system that gets 80% is what's required by the Connecticut DEP for stormwater treatment. And basically what we have is an improvement on the site, because the trucks that currently go on the site do not, if they're leaking hydraulic fluid or whatever, oil, that is not being treated now by any system. We're going to treat it, but we're going to treat it by a standard that's been accepted by the Connecticut DEP. And that is to protect the environment generally. So we're going to do that. The questions that everybody seems to be focused on, or particularly Dirk Parafort, is what happens to the stuff in the building? And hopefully that Merrick has now explained, none of that will get discharged into our stormwater drainage system. We're going to sort it and separate it in an enclosed building. Now, Dirk, I'm not sure that you were brought up to date at because of the comments and the questions in planning and zoning. The building has been modified to be enclosed. The doorways that were going to be open doorways will now have overhead doors. So the whole building will be enclosed, which should go a long way to the concern that rainwater is going to come in from the outside into the building and make a mess that would result in an environmental concern. So we've closed up the building, and the materials that you're worried about, which could conceivably sneak in, they're not supposed to be, as you say, people tend to sometimes take advantage of trying to get rid of hazardous materials in an improper way. We're going to pick that up in the building, and as I say, whatever we need to remove from the site in terms of drainage inside the building will go into a holding tank. So I think that there's no demonstrable threat to the impairment of the wetlands. And clearly, the proposal that we're making now is an improvement to the stormwater drainage that exists there currently. So the new system will be an improvement that will benefit the wetlands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Was that it for public participation and responses? Okay, David, I believe you had some comments.
Dave, let me ask a quick question. Lou David, alternate. I want to go back to what Peter asked a little bit, what he was going on with the 80% and 20%. First of all, do you have any restrictions on what people are dumping off there, like batteries, hazard waste, liquids, and everything? Do you have any kind of restriction on what they can't dump there?
You want me to answer that, Neil?
Yeah, Merrick, I was going to say, could you take that?
Yeah. Merrick Anchor Engineering. No liquids are allowed on this facility. There is if you have the plan in front of you, there is a chart of what is permitted on site, and no hazardous waste is permitted on the property. What is permitted are basically oversized material like mattresses or carpets.
What about batteries?
I do not believe capacitors, ballasts, or batteries are allowed. Propane tanks without valves are allowed, but not with the valves. Items like that. But there is a list currently on the plan, so you can actually look at what is allowed and what is not allowed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? Okay, back to you, David.
Okay. Dave McCollum, Inland Wetlands Agent. Thank you very much, Ken. I'm going to try to keep my comments brief. And the briefest version that I can give is that I would advise that this commission continue this public hearing to their next meeting on May 18th. And to embellish why I would advise that is because while the items submitted by Merrick, Mr. McManus, and Mr. McManus and CCA answered some of my questions in my WORT review and my commission memorandum. They did not respond to and or address all of them. I could go into some of the ones which are more of like minutia, but I don't think that's, in the interest of time, I don't think that's important. I will say, just to take a couple of excerpts from Mr. McManus's report, I'll go through some of what he has provided first. In the last paragraph of his report on page 5, quote, a formal assessment of the functions and values of the yet to be delineated edge of the large, predominantly off-site wetland complex is not provided herein. End quote. Or there's a section that goes on beyond that, which says, and is considered beyond the scope of this report since only a very small portion occurs on site, end quote. I think it's important, if we're going to have the wetlands delineated, we don't have just one section, we have all of them, especially if the section that we're looking at pertains to an upland review area where we still have regulated activities occurring. My next thing that I would want to mention is that another comment from Mr. McManus's report, page 7, quote, the proposed plan shows that the proposed earthwork associated with the proposal will be accomplished within the existing disturbed open areas of the site, end quote. We need to figure out what the limits of disturbance are. And I thought I had made that clear in my report. If I'm looking at the map references on the general permit plan, the ones that we're looking at in terms of zoning locations and for the site plan, they're from information that was gathered November 19, 2003 and September 19th, 2006. We need to have a plan that shows where the existing limit of disturbance is now. And I don't know if Mr. Kennett meant to embellish that in his reports, but if it isn't already, that it needs to be put out for the record, because we need to know where that limit of disturbance is going to go up to, where it is now relative to that, and that goes for both sides of the property where the regulated upland review area was altered, and the side of the subject property that's closest to where the processed wood materials and the 8,000 square foot Butler building are. There are a couple other things that I can go into with Mr. McManus's report, but I think those are the two biggest ones that I have. I guess the questions that I have from Mr. Kemen at this point is we keep mentioning a hydrodynamic separator. Apart from there being a brief mention of it in the stormwater drainage report and a call out for it on the general permit plan. I don't have a detail for it. So there's no specs as to what it is or, you know, what it's meant to remove from the site and what have you. And I think if there is going to be an element which the public has expressed concern about, and I think which the commission has a right to be concerned about, where it pertains to the removal of you know, materials, debris, oils, grease, what have you, that would otherwise drain into the wetland through the 15-inch existing corrugated pipe that acts as an outflow for the existing stormwater detention galleries. I think it's an item that needs to be addressed. We need to have that detail. We need to know what that is before we get into that. And then another comment that I would have is we mentioned the 80% TSS. I think that's what Merrick was trying to address, and I think that's where that buzzword came from up previously. I think it's the total suspended solids. A quote from the stormwater treatment notes on the general permit plan indicates, quote, contractor to provide submittal of proposed structure that includes calculations or documentation verifying the 80% minimum of the average annual total suspended solids will be removed from the WQF submittal, shall also include plan verifying layout and inverts for the structure. I had asked for that before we have the building constructed, before we have an approval. I think it's important that we know that that 80% TSS is going to be achieved before the commission closes this hearing. I have a couple of other comments that I can get into. I really don't want to go at any length tonight. I guess one last question that I would have is there's been a mention of holding tanks. I'm not so sure if that's meant to infer the galleries that are on site, any other existing stormwater management structure, or perhaps something that's in the building. I'm looking at the detail sheet, or the second sheet rather, of the plans, and Mr. Kemen, if you're so inclined, you can bring those up. I'm just trying to figure out where this holding tank is. Is it above ground? Is it underneath the surface somewhere? I'm just trying to figure out where it is and what it's meant to be connected to, because I don't see it. Those are my comments from now. Like I said, I would advise that we have the applicant responds to some of these questions and some of the other questions that are still unanswered from my report. And we may also want to be considerate as to whether or not Wright Pierce has had all of their engineering comments addressed with their review. That's all I have for now.
Ken Stevens, for the record. Based on David's comments, I would recommend in like a consensus from the commission that we continue this public hearing until our next scheduled meeting of May the 18th.
Second.
We don't need a motion for this, guy.
We don't need a motion. We just
Okay, no problem. I like this.
Lou, you're good. Greg's
I'm
good.
good.
Peter. Patricia,
I have a question.
ask away.
The holding tank that's handling the liquids, the runoff inside the building, how large is that, and does it get pumped, and how often, and could it ever be damaged?
Can Merrick answer that quickly as far as the holding tank and what its use is for?
Yeah, absolutely. Merrick Kemen, Anchor Engineering. Currently, there is an existing holding tank which is east of the trailer, the existing trailer that's on site for their bathroom that's in the trailer. That is noted on the plans. It should be pretty obvious of where it is. And originally, that holding tank was going to be relocated with the relocation of the trailer. However, we're not going to relocate that. We're going to keep that existing holding tank in place for drainage for the interior of the building. The The holding tank itself is probably a 1,000-gallon tank for this type of facility. That's the minimum that would have been installed. That will need to be verified. But basically, it's a concrete holding vault, very similar to a septic tank, which is going to get pumped out periodically when needed. It's not going to be routinely done because it's probably not going to be utilized all the time. But it will be pumped when required to do so. And maintained. To answer David's question, the tank is below ground. That is the purpose of the holding tank, so it can catch that drainage water. Regarding another comment regarding the stormwater treatment, yes, that note on the plans is there. Basically, the contractor has to provide a submittal, which is going to get reviewed by the engineering department for design of that treatment center. In that note, it also says and specs out exactly how much runoff needs to be retained. So that is something that still needs to be provided by the contractor prior to installation. You know, it's a requirement to be submitted for design.
Thank you, Merrick.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So based on the consensus, we'll continue this public hearing until May the 18th, our next scheduled Inland Wetlands Commission meeting. I'm going to break the agenda and move immediately. And David, I ask for your comments on this to our application decisions, and so that we can talk about number 10 Shelley, number 47 Shelley Road. We've been here quite a while tonight, but I don't want to suggest we move this. I'd like to see this item addressed. I know the applicant is on I believe the applicant is still on the phone. David, do you comments on this?
Yeah, I don't have any issue if the applicant or if the commission wants to move an item up higher to be immediately discussed in the agenda. We just
my question wasn't on moving the item. My question was, do you have any comments on the item?
Oh, sorry.
So if I can interrupt 1 second, sorry, Pat Parafort, just want to note our request to be reseated.
Okay, thank you, Pat. You are no longer recused from the meeting. So
Dave, I might have to cut you off on this one. I told you when I called you before.
Right.
About that, okay?
Okay. Just let us know when you're leaving. Dave McCollum, the Wetlands agent. Just let us know when you're leaving.
Dave, probably right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Good night.
Okay.
Night.
Right.
Okay. So I'm just going to try to keep this short and sweet, because this draft resolution of approval, it hasn't changed since I drafted all the way back in March. In fact, it's more or less the same as it was for its draft date, March 24th, 2020. I'll just go through some of the conditions on the approval that we haven't seen before, or ones that aren't commonplace. I've broken them down into categories. I'm not going to go through every single one. We're just going to go through the ones I think, like I said, are important.
Excuse me, David, before you do that, may I make a suggestion?
Sure.
The commission has had this in writing in front of them.
Yes.
Since March.
Yes.
I would, before you go through the conditions that you feel are important, again, it's late at night, you've already lost one commissioner. I would defer and ask the commission members if you have any questions or need clarification on any of your proposed conditions.
Okay. Are there any questions with any of the conditions that are in the draft resolution of approval?
No.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Dave McCollum and the Wetlands agent. So with that being said, I'm just going to go into the ones that we haven't seen before. Stormwater management system components, conditions 12 and 13. I highlighted those conditions so they stuck out. Those are conditions that are comments from our reviewing engineer, Todd Ritchie, and our soil scientist, Cynthia Rabinowitz. That's comments 12 and 13 respectively. So those really are what those are meant to be for. The comment that's beneath that is for the pocket pond.
Dear, I'm almost done.
Patricia, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
Okay. So another comment I think that would stick out for me is the one that's at the very end, not the very end. The comment 21 is the last comment on page 5 of 6. We had recurring questions through the application review process regarding to blasting. And this comment is more or less to address, you know, what the protocol would be should blasting need to occur. It more or less says that I have to receive a report from a geotechnical engineer working on behalf of the applicant that substantiates that the groundwater flow that is on site will not alter any of the conditions that are for the wetlands or the water courses that were identified in the application. The other comments that you have are more or less boilerplate. They may not be worded as you've seen them before, or organized as you've seen them before, but the intent is more or less for them to be the same as comments that you've seen before. Just one final opportunity for the commission to ask any questions.
Ken Stevens for the record. I have no further questions at this point. Anyone else on the commission?
Okay. I'm just going to say, in closing, Dave McCollum and the wetlands agent, that the commission is using reasons 1 through 3 as stated in the decision process portion of the inland wetlands regulations. If I can go to I believe it's the criteria for this, or the considerations for decision 4.4.3 that were taken into consideration, and I've listed them on page 6 of 6 of the zoning, or of the resolution of approval. They're the same as we've had for previous approvals. I just would advise that whoever makes the motion includes that portion in the motion before we go to a vote.
All right, so I make a motion that we approve the application for 47 Shelley Road with the stipulation and amendments as outlined in the memo on March 24th, 2020 from Inland Wetland Agent, is based on the findings as stated in the memo on page 6, label 1, 2, and 3.
I second the motion.
Thanks, David.
Ken Stevens for the record.
That motion suffices, Patrick. Dave McCollum, yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Pat Parafort, aye.
Greg Johnston, aye.
Peter Samardak, aye.
That's I.
And Stevens, aye. So moved. Thank you very much. We can go back. That's the last of the active items. If anybody from the public wants to stay for the remainder of the meeting, you're more than welcome to. We have a few more items to cover, business items. David, was there anything in addition to the business items on the plan, on the agenda, that you wanted to cover with the public?
I have a couple items in my inland wetlands agent report. One of them is an outstanding item, 32 Henry Street. That will be attended back to once we get through the public health crisis. I didn't think it was very fair for one of the few businesses that can remain open through this public health crisis to have to worry about dealing with an enforcement action while there was the greater need to serve the public for the benefits of health and safety. So I'm just going to continue to table that, and hopefully we'll have an update for you once we get through the public health crisis. The other item is agent approval, which I signed last week for a single-family dwelling at 18 Vale Road. The main items were the installation of an on-site subsewage subsurface sewage disposal system, leaching area, septic tank, and pump chamber, and the associated site improvements within regulated 100-foot upland review area. I can pull it up on your screen if you want me to share with you the site plans. I'm more than happy to. It was pretty straightforward for me. The limit of disturbance was pretty well defined. There's a stone wall that they're not going to go past, which separates the disturbance from the wetlands, which would be to the west of, to the west of where the subject development occurs. My conditions for that were pretty much boilerplate. Give us erosion sedimentation controls that last through the duration of the project. Make sure that you have your ducks in a row with engineering and public works in this case, because there is a tie-in with a catch basin on the side of Vale Road if you're going due south of where Michael's at the Grove is.
No, and David, I apologize, but I lost the sound on the first part of your comments. Are you recommending that you handle this in an administrative nature on behalf of the commission?
Yes, Dave McCollum and the Wetland agent. I have already processed this for as an administrative agent approval. I as an inland wetlands agent have to report my activities to you.
Thank you.
And if you need me to go into what I reviewed, more than happy to, but it's pretty cut and dry, I would think. So I didn't think that was necessary.
So let's return back to the first page of the agenda. And we need a motion for review and approval and acceptance of the Inland Wetlands Commission meeting minutes from February the 24th. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to accept those. Peter Samardek, Vice Chair. I make a motion to accept all of the minutes from April Wetlands meetings, Commission meetings.
That's going to be February 24th, Peter.
Yeah, that's what I meant, February 24th.
And do we have a second?
Second,
Greg John.
Pat Pear.
All in
Go ahead,
favor?
Greg.
Pat got it.
We're going to have to do a Dave McCollum and the Wetlands agent. We're going to have to do a roll call for this, guys. You're going to have to go by one to say aye or nay. We can't have everybody shouting all at once because then it doesn't go well for the recording.
Okay, so all those in favor of approving the Inland Wetlands Commission meeting minutes of February the 24th, 2020. I'll start. Aye, I'm in favor. Greg?
Aye, in favor.
Patricia?
In favor, Pat Sell.
Peter?
Peter Samardek, in favor.
Patrick?
Pat Paraford, in favor.
Next item, Inland Wetlands Commission meeting minutes, March the 9th, 2020. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion. This is Peter. I'll make a motion to approve the Inland Wetlands Commission meeting minutes from March 9th, 2020.
Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Do we have a second?
Second, Pat Sell.
Position, Ken Stevens, approve. Greg?
Approve.
Patricia?
Approve.
Patrick?
Pat Paraford, approved.
Peter?
Peter Samardek, approved.
Okay. Dave McCollum and the Wetlands agent. I would just like to advise that Mr. Stevens, Mr. Johnson, and Ms. Sell were not present at that special meeting on March 9th. The commissioners that were present.
Right. I removed Ken Stevens. I removed my vote.
Okay. The commissioners present that were at that meeting include Mr. Samardak and Mr. Parafort. So
And they both have recorded a position of approve.
I'm not sure if we don't have the majority of the participants in that meeting here tonight to vote on it, whether or not we can.
You can.
Okay.
You can. You can approve the minutes.
Okay.
Greg, quick question. If we read the minutes, even if we weren't at the meeting, can't we approve them?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Beth. Dave McCollum.
That's okay. Don't, just keep going.
Okay.
So moved. So moved. So next item, there's an invoice from Connecticut Media Group, Danbury News Times, dated 3/31/2020 in the amount of $555.50. Do we have a motion for approval and payment?
This is Peter again, Samardak. I'd like to make a motion to pay the invoice for Connecticut's Media Group, Danbury News Times on 3/31/2020 for $555.50.
And do we have a second?
Greg Johnston, second.
Positions, please. Peter.
I would approve.
Greg.
Approve.
Patricia.
Approve.
Patrick.
Pat Parafort, approve.
Ken Stevens, approve. There's also an invoice from Northwest Conservation District, third-party review for number 9 Good Hill Road, in the amount of $2,520. I'll make a motion that we approve that and pay it. Do we have a second?
This is Peter. I'll second it.
Ken, I'm sorry, how much was that amount?
$2,520.00.
Thank you.
All right there. Peter, you seconded. Greg, position.
Approve.
Patricia.
Approve.
Patrick.
Pat Parafort, approved.
Ken, since I made the motion, I approve. We have no new business. Apparently no old business.
That is correct, Dave McCollum and the Wetland Taker.
Do we have a motion to close the meeting?
If nobody makes it, I will.
And I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Pat Parafort, aye.
Good night.
See you, everybody. Stay healthy.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Good